Good morning, everyone. My name is Lance Barron, and I'm a member of the Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter, and welcoming you to Off the Shelf for our March meeting, March 2025, for those of you watching from home. And we have a very special guest with us this morning, and I'll leave her introduction to Dawn, who will interview Carmen Amato in just a few minutes, or less than a few minutes. Uh, Sisters in Crime is a national organization that was established in 1986 to promote women crime writers who were otherwise underserved by the traditional publishing industry. And since that time, the membership has expanded to include people from all walks of life. And the goal then of Sisters in Crime National is to make people feel comfortable in the organization if they're a writer or a reader, and it welcomes everyone, as you can see from my personal experience, across the spectrum. And we're very glad you're here, and thanks for tuning in. Dawn?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lance. I appreciate that warm welcome. And I am very excited to talk with our guest today. She is the ex-CIA intelligence officer, Carmen Amato. She is also the award-winning author of 17 thriller novels, which includes two series and two standalones. She is a recipient of both the National Intelligence Award and the Career Intelligence Medal. She's originally from upstate New York, and she holds degrees from Lemoyne College and the University of Virginia, plus certificates from Institut Catholique. I hope I pronounced that okay, in Paris, and the Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. She currently lives in Tennessee with her husband and two German shepherds, Hazel and Bear. Thank you for joining us today, Carmen. Welcome to Off the Shelf.
Dawn, thanks so much for that great introduction. It makes me sound, like I know what I'm doing every day. So,
well, I think you do know what you're doing. I mean, 17 thrillers under your belt, plus you have other writing that you do, and we'll of course get to that. But you do know what you're doing, and I think that's why we're so thrilled to have you here and to learn something from you and about your writing career. But let's get started the way I always like to start off these conversations, and that is to get to know you a little bit deeper than the blurb on your book jackets. Starting off with, tell us about your childhood and growing up in upstate New York.
well, that's a different approach. Okay, I am the youngest of four. My dad passed away when I was very little, so I never knew him. The four of us with my mom we lived next door to my maternal grandparents in a house that my grandfather built.
Oh,
And one of the highlights of my childhood was, of course, big Catholic family, was going to church on Sunday. We always dressed up. It was a big event. And then we went to my grandparents' house, which was, just the other porch, for coffee and donuts. And if we were lucky, we would get my grandfather to tell stories of when he was a deputy sheriff in the 1920s during Prohibition. And I remember one time my brother asked him, well, if you could do it all over again, what would you do? And my grandfather said, hey, he would have been in the mob because that's where all the money was. And this was really interesting because he'd been in law enforcement, for 60 years. But that was a great, great childhood. Grew up in upstate New York, as you mentioned, in Rome, New York. So everyone there was Catholic. And if you were Italian, you went to St. John's. If you were Irish, you went to St. Paul's. If you were German, you went to St. Mary's. And that's the vibe that I used when I wrote the Galliano Club books, drawing from my grandfather's stories. So family has provided a lot of impetus and a lot of support to all of my careers.
So take us, let's talk about your career. You are an ex-CIA intelligence officer. And I'm really fascinated by that. And you were with them for 30 years. So how did you, was that a goal for you? I mean, you mentioned your grandfather was in law enforcement. So what was the draw into that? And how did you do it?
Well, first of all, let's make the distinction. The Central Intelligence Agency is not a law enforcement agency.
Okay.
Has no law enforcement authority, and they have no authority within the US. This is just an externally focused intelligence gathering organization with the mandate to carry out presidential findings for covert action, which means, once again, overseas. How I got there was more of what I didn't want to do. Although I had a great childhood growing up in Rome, by the time I went to college, the city was already kind of falling into hard times. A lot of what underpinned the city was Griffiths Air Force Base. It was a strategic Air Command base, SAC base, with the heavy bombers with nuclear weapons on board. When they closed that, you know, the city really started to fall on to economic hard times. So I went to college. My mother was very insistent that all four of us go to college, and we all did. But I knew there wasn't much left for me there. So I kept going, went to grad school, and was recruited out of graduate school. And part of the, I don't know, I guess what made my CV attractive to the recruiters was that I had spent my junior year in Paris on a program that allowed students to directly enroll in French universities, as opposed to being in the country and going to an American, you know, a college, as a lot of those junior year in Paris or junior year abroad programs are. So I got recruited out of the University of Virginia and passed all of the interviews and the polygraph and the more interviews, and was hired as an analyst, an all-source analyst, which means all of the human collected, the technical signals collected information, whatever, comes to your desk on a particular topic or country, and you have to make sense of it and write it for publications such as the President's Daily Brief. That was not a job I particularly enjoyed. I think I learned a lot, but it was pretty tame. You were sitting in an office, basically. So I parlayed that into other positions that dealt more with technical concerns. Everybody uses Google Translate, right? It's very easy. There's a million languages, you know, easy peasy. Well, before that, there was machine translation. And I was part of various teams looking at that and how it could be applied. Did some overseas, ran a technical collection platform overseas. Probably one of my favorite jobs was running a program that involved employees across the Western Hemisphere. And I wrapped my career as the head of one of the national tradecraft schools. And that was right about the time that the agency was going through a really big reorganization under John Brennan. So you know, did my 30 years and I was glad to go.
Well,
So-
let's go back just a bit. What did you study in school? And then Linda Whitaker, I think this is going to parlay into Linda's question, which is, I love Linda's question. But yeah, let's go back to what your educational choices were and what you thought you might do with that education before the CIA came knocking.
Let's see, my undergrad degree is a double major in history and poli-sci with a minor in theater.
Wow.
And I was only able to pull that off because that year in Paris, I just took the same number of classes I would have taken had I been in the US. So I was able to take classes at the Sorbonne, at Sciences Po, which is the National School of Political Science, and Institut Catholique. So what did I know? I figured you get 3 credits for each. I got to manage to graduate from my college on time. And when I got back, they gave me like 5 credits instead of 3 per class. So after all that, all I needed to do was take a statistics and an econ class, which I took pass-fail in order to get the double major. So hooray for me. From there, I did a master's in international relations at the University of Virginia. So it was pretty natural progression, I think.
It absolutely is. But again, you didn't know they were gonna recruit you, but were you kind of eyeing it as a possibility, or did you have a different career path in mind with this education?
Everybody who was in that international relations program at UVA was looking to get a job in Washington.
Got it.
So I was just sort of in the crowd. A lot of folks went into NSA. I think I might have been the only one in my year, to go into the CIA. Everybody was taking the State Department exam. It was a kind of a feeder school, I think, in some ways.
Okay. So I didn't know that. And Linda, I love Linda's question. How do you get recruited? Do they pass you a note in the hallway?
No, it's really so normal. A recruiter came to the school and they were trying to sign up and have interviews with as many people as possible. So, I put down my name and had an interview with the recruiter, and it was a woman, and I remember she was wearing the most beautiful scarf for whatever reason. I was a grad student, I had no money, she was really well dressed. And had no idea. For a lot of people, they did the interview, they never heard anything. And I was very excited to get that call back. So
Oh, for sure.
yeah, so sorry, Linda, it's like so normal.
Well, what I was thinking of when I was researching you, I was thinking of that movie, The Good Shepherd.
Oh yeah.
And and that was kind of like really, secretive. The whole thing was really secretive. So I totally, when I saw Linda's question, it made me laugh, because that's exactly, how we envision it. And now you're like, oh, it's just kind of normal. It's just.
And during my career, I was an agency recruiter. So I would be the person going to that school and talking to folks and seeing who would make the cut to go, so it's pretty normal.
And wearing a beautiful scarf?
Probably not. I have never achieved that level of sartorial elegance as that first recruiter.
Well, that's a great story, and it is enlightening to I think, to us, because we do kind of think of it as this like secret, exclusive society. And so now you mentioned that you lived overseas, so you had to move around a bit, and I know you got married and you have a family, so how does this all work for you and your family? And
Well,
who's moving who? Is your husband moving you guys, or are you moving them?
The agency is very well known for what they call tandem spouses. And it is easy if you marry somebody within the agency because you can talk about work. You both have security clearances, you might work in the same area, etc. So I did meet my husband, a colleague of mine was married to a colleague of his. They had a Memorial Day picnic. We played Trivial Pursuit. The guys won. The rest is history. So we were married a year later. We ended up moving so much. I think we calculated like 19 moves in like 20 years, something like that. You know, it was a lot. But he was the primary for these moves, and I was what they called the trailing spouse, so that his job took us there. I got a job when we were there. And then when we came back, my home office had to always have a job for me at the same level as the job that I last had with them. And that actually worked out really well for my career, because when I would come back to my home directorate, they were thrilled to get somebody who had a wider breadth of experience than somebody who had just stayed in the building for those 2 years. So our kids got a great overseas education. Not so much, I think, because the schools they attended were any better than schools in the US, but they were just exposed to a wider breadth of things. They had to cope with more problems. And as adults, you really saw the payoff during the pandemic, because they both came through with flying colors. They really had learned resilience skills overseas.
Were they still in school during the pandemic, or
No.
were they out in the world? Okay.
They were out in the world, living on their own, both single, working. My daughter got laid off like 3 times, and always, you know, immediately got herself another position. And even when she didn't have a position, she found herself things to do to keep herself fit and sharp. She would joke, "Can you believe people my age don't know how to cook?"
And that is, I don't know how old your daughter is, but I can tell you my 25-year-old son knows how to make, a few things. Eggs and maybe boiled macaroni with butter and salt and pepper. And that's fine. Like, we'll get there eventually, I hope. Okay, so Linda also asked, do you have any stories you can tell us about what you did on your travels abroad?
Well, I can tell you a few things. At one point in my career, I was traveling not in a technical collection situation, and my travels took me across the South Pacific. And I arrived in Fiji in the middle of the night, 2 weeks after the country had suffered its second coup d'etat. And this was a racial issue. In Fiji, all the land belongs to the native Fijians, but there is a very large population from India, which had been brought in when Fiji was under British colonial rule to work the sugarcane fields. And sugar is the #1 export in that country. And if you've ever had a Cadbury chocolate bar, probably the sugar in that chocolate bar came from Fiji. So I am, alone, female. I was probably about 27 at the time. And the airport in Suva on the main island is about 10 miles, 10, 15 miles away from the city itself. So, there's a lot of tension. Here I am arriving so soon after the coup, and things are very unsettled. And I walk out to the cab rank with my suitcase and, get into the first taxi, and it is driven by an Indian gentleman in a turban. And it's pitch black, there are no streetlights, there are nothing. It is just inky black. I am hoping that this is, going to be a good situation. Just get me to the hotel. Must have been about 2 a.m. And we come to a roadblock. And the roadblock is manned by a single Fijian soldier wearing traditional Fijian dress, which is their military dress, which is like a military blouse, as they call them, with his insignia and all, and the traditional bottom garment, which is called a sulu, and it's sort of like a lightweight kilt.
Mhm.
And then he's got army boots, and he's, got his assault rifle and all. So also he's about 7 feet tall. Fijian men are very, very good looking, and they are very tall and broad. And if, frankly, you ever were interested in South Pacific cheesecake, that's the place to go. So he's stunningly good looking and makes the taxi stop, and the taxi driver is just like shaking with nerves. Hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. He's obviously not going to do anything. I don't know what to do, So I roll down my window and I hold out my US passport. And this soldier kind of leans down, looks at me and goes, "Hello," in this like rich, incredibly sexy voice. I'm like, "Hello," and handed my passport. So he looks through my passport, and I think the cab driver's ready to cry with nerves, and I don't know what to do. I'm not going to get out of the car. What am I supposed to do? And the soldier comes back and he hands me back the passport and he goes, "Goodbye." Goodbye. I'm in love with you. So, rolled my window back up. He lifted the barrier, and the taxi drove me into Suva with no words exchanged between me and the cab driver again. I paid him, and that was it.
I have to tell you, I was like on the edge of my seat. Like I was so frightened of where this might go. And so I'm so relieved that it was a good experience, at the end of the day. But that I can imagine how that can be very unsettling and very frightening, especially when the one person who could have been your advocate and could have helped you the most, like froze. And you had to, pull yourself together. And thank goodness, because that means you're here to tell us the rest of your story. And that's a great time you took us through your career. And I know that you lived in different places. And let's talk about your writing. So when you finished up with the CIA, you retired, and then is that when you started writing, or had you already been writing?
I had already been writing. I actually started writing quite a bit before I retired when my son was really little. And he's 31 now, so that's a while ago. He was a very precocious reader and he loved airplanes. We had a small airplane when he was young. My husband's a private pilot. And so my son, for take your favorite book to school day, first grade, took a copy of Dale Brown's thriller, Flight of the Old Dog, which he had read like 10 times already. Okay, that precocious.
Impressive.
And the teacher scolded him because she said, there's no way you could read that. And my husband was livid. Well, I thought, okay, what if I wrote him an adventure story that is more for elementary school students? So I ended up writing two books with a 14-year-old protagonist, kind of like Hardy Boys meets Dale Brown, that have never been published. And I think they're on a floppy drive somewhere. By the time I had written him, my son was way beyond that level anyway. So, but that taught me that I could write a whole story, beginning, middle, end, and have it make sense, and at least, have one reader who liked it. But when we were in Mexico, I wanted to write something about what I saw there when it comes to social inequality. Women deliberately earn much less than men do. They are closed out of a lot of, that's the culture. They're closed out of a lot of positions. It's still a very tight social ladder. If you're born at the bottom, it's a caste system. You're not going to move up the ladder. If you're at the top, you're never going down. It's a really different dynamic, different social dynamic than what I expected and what probably a lot of Americans understand about Mexico. So I wanted to write something about that. Unfortunately, I'm not an anthropologist and not an academic. I really didn't think that a nonfiction book was going to get any traction. So I decided to write it as a thriller. And that ended up being my first book, which was published before, about 4 years before I left the agency. But because I was supervising a large number of people, in order, I really couldn't let them know, because I could not create a situation in which they felt obligated to buy the boss's book. So, but the book is out and all, but I had to keep quiet about it. So, but that was The Hidden Light of Mexico City. And I followed that up with the first Detective Emilia Cruz novel, Cliff Diver.
And so you wrote Cliff Diver, you're still working.
Mm-hmm.
And you're writing under your real name. So like, are you?
My middle name. Carmen is my middle name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
there were very few people who knew I was publishing.
Right. Excuse me. So what I'm thinking is you've written a book and it is well received. And so I imagine it's like in bookstores, and I work for you and I walk through the bookstore. I don't know that's you. Or do you see what I'm saying? Like,
hopefully not.
Okay. Okay. So were those the only two books you wrote while you were still working?
No. Let's see. I wrote the first 3 books in the Detective Emilia Cruz, put those out. But one thing that made a difference, the initial covers of the Detective Emilia Cruz series were just sort of generic pictures of the ocean, okay, pictures of the shore, sand and beach. It didn't really say, ooh, you know, police procedural or mystery or anything particular. And it wasn't until I left, you know, retired, and the books got rebranded that they really took off. So, and that's the cover that kind of started the wheels turning when Cliff Diver got a new cover, and things took off after that. So timing wise, it all worked out.
I do like your covers, and they are you can tell that they're the same story. They what am I trying to say?
They are
They
very,
look
this
alike.
is my favorite.
Yeah.
They do, they're very consistent. The
Yes.
design's very eye-catching. They stand out in the sea of kind of murky, you know, mystery covers. And the artist who does them, Matt Chase, I think is a genius. This is another really good one where the whodunit starts off with somebody who's killed by an injection, and then he put all these little skulls to make it a cocktail, of course, because of the name Russian Mojito. And then Narco Noir,
The film.
she's caught undercover as a taxi driver, but then ends up in a movie set. So I just love the way he did that. And then, of course, the last one that just came out a month ago, Barracuda Bay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think he did a great job with the Barracuda there. And the Barracuda Bay kind of closes an arc that started with book 5. Barracuda Bay is number 9. The arc started with number 5. And when he found that out, he kind of used the same colors. So it's just great to have the covers in such good hands.
Yes, and I think so. And it seems like he gets you, and he's more than just an artist. Like, he incorporates a tidbit of the story without compromising the design and the consistency of the design. So yeah, it sounds like you guys are a great team as far as that goes. That's great. Congratulations on all of that. Now, you mentioned Barracuda Bay is number 9. And you also mentioned that from 5 to 9, there's a character, or there's an arc that closes. One of the questions I had for you is the fact that when you write 9 books with the same character, what kind of challenges, if any, do you have in a character arc that carries through 9 books, possibly more? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's too much of a challenge, because I'm always looking at the news coming out of Mexico for inspiration. And unfortunately, there's a lot of grist for the mill, shall we say. If you've been looking at the news, you know that in the state of Jalisco, they just found basically an extermination ranch where cartels were killing off enemies, people they no longer had use for, et cetera. And they found a huge killing field there. You've got the president turning over 29 jailed drug kingpins to the US in a move that was really unprecedented. So is the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, trying to get a better handle on violence after her predecessor, who's the same political party as her, was touting, what was it, hugs, not bullets, towards the cartels. You know, so anyways, there's a lot of grist for the mill. Every book has a major plot, the major whodunit, the crime, has a subplot that is also crime related, and a personal dilemma twist. So they all knit together in every book as it proceeds. So that certainly keeps my brain working, because I do like to create a complex situation. So when I start, it's always, what situation have I not put this poor character in before? What action element can I work in? Is it going to be a chase scene? Is it going to be on foot, on car? You know, what can I do that's different from a previous book? And in her personal life, I've seeded the series with her mother, who is kind of having a perpetual mental breakdown. The boyfriend that she doesn't know if she can commit to because he's a gringo and he lives in a hotel. What are her relationships with her colleagues? And she almost always has a new lieutenant making her life, you know, good or bad, as the case may be. So, and now with book 9, there's just so much material to work with that I can, you know, manipulate and send her in various directions. Kind of like Harry Potter, you know, after the first 2 books, there was a lot of meat there to do something with, to send it in different directions. And that's kind of where I am right now. There's a lot of meat on the bone that I can, you know, chew on.
That's great. And so do you have a series Bible that helps you keep up with this, or is it in here and you just, you know what you've already done and you don't need to re-reference?
I don't have a series Bible. I have a book in a box. For all of my either standalone books or series, I literally have a box, and it is full of the maps I use, or the descriptions of characters, little bits and pieces of news clippings that I'm saving for something that can come down the road. In fact, that's where the plot of Narco Noir, book 8, came from, was I think 2016 copy of the International Miami Herald that showed on the front cover, I think it was Honduras, a taxi driver whose taxi was the first in the rank, you know, of cars lined up. And some gang member just came up and shot him in the head and killed him because the gang was extorting money from the taxi drivers and they hadn't paid enough. And so they had threatened to kill the first in line, and they did. So that became the jumping off point for Narco Noir. And that's how she ends up going undercover as a taxi driver, thinking she's going to try and figure out this game. So not so much a Bible, but a box of reference material and descriptions I want to recall, like the bar in the hotel where Emilia Cruz and her boyfriend Kurt Rucker live. I gotta always remember what that looks like. People will catch things.
Yes, your readers will, and they'll, you know, they'll say, "I thought her hair was curly, and you said it was straight," and so, yeah. So So, but that's great. That's good that your readers are paying attention, and I like your organization system. I'm a little fascinated by that. Before we go too far down the road, I want to ask a question that Lance brought up that's related to you when you were writing and still working. And he said, did you have to have the agency review your book or books before publication?
I did not, because they have nothing to do with intelligence or the CIA.
Okay, so let's talk about, and I don't want to get too far down the road because I know we have another series to chat about, but you're from New York and you've lived other places, but you seem to have a kinship with Mexico, because that's where you put Emilia Cruz. But I know you also wrote some nonfiction books about traveling to Mexico and like vacationing there and stuff. So, and you've put, it's the setting of 9 of your thrillers, but you've also written like a 5-story anthology of Emilia and 2 novellas. So like there's a real draw, considering your versatility in the world, like there seems to be a real draw to Mexico.
There is, I think, the time we spent in Mexico and then in other places in Central America, were really kind of seminal experiences for our whole family. And also, growing up Italian, there's a lot of commonalities with Mexico. And so I felt it was very easy to adapt and to learn about the culture, to really connect with the people there. So that was an easy transition. And considering everything that's going on with Mexico and the US, it's just an added incentive. One of the first things that happened after I retired is I joined a Facebook group called Mexico Writers. And it was all people who were living in Mexico and writing in English, or writing about Mexico. And for a number of years, that organization was such a huge support mechanism for me and for so many other writers. And I've met so many just interesting writers through that. Linda L. Locke, who writes a mystery series set on Isla Mujeres, which is near Cancun. She's also writing a Canadian series set in vineyards. Dr. Michael Hogan, who wrote Abraham Lincoln and Mexico, and so many other books. A wonderful educator, poet, and writer who's living in Guadalajara. I could go on, but those folks really supported me in my writing. And it was through that group that I ended up the editor of 2 different travel essay collections that you referenced. But I didn't write them. I was just the editor. But that was great. So those still sell every month, you know.
I think that's a good segue into another question Linda has, because she says, given the current political climate, are Americans welcome in Mexico? Is it a good place to vacation right now?
I wouldn't put it quite that way, Linda. It's like, is this your best choice for where to go on vacation, considering the violence in the country? I think that's the better question. There are certainly pockets that are safe and places to go. Mexico City is, always a great destination, Cancun. But frankly, the interior of the country where things are really violent, unfortunately, Acapulco was on the, no-go list. And all the beach resorts like Zihuatanejo and Ixtapa, which are just north of Acapulco, you can't drive safely on those roads. So unfortunately, that's probably not where you are going to go for a beach vacation.
Mm. That's unfortunate. So let's quickly, because already we're almost at our hour already, but you kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from the Emilia Cruz series, and you started a new series. And you wrote 3 novels and 1 prequel. Is that considered a novel, the prequel as well? So 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that, because you went in a completely different direction. Like, it's like, I need a break. Let me go over here.
That was the Galliano Club series was my pandemic project. My mom was in lockdown in upstate New York. I was here in Tennessee. We could tell that the situation was having a terrible toll on her memory, her moods, etc. So every night I would call and we would talk about positive things about her growing up in Rome, New York. And she was born in 1929. So her memory of things in the 30s, really captured a different lifestyle completely. So I told her I would write all this down, and that became the Galliano Club books. She passed away in October this past year at the age of 95. And she'd never read any of the Galliano Club books, but she was always such a big fan of mine. So those books are a closed loop. That's the whole series. I'm not going to write anymore. It meant that there was a 3-year span between the Detective Emilia Cruz books 8 and 9. So I feel like I'm having to build momentum again for that series. I kind of let it all wither while I brought out the Galliano Club books. But yes, that was a family project. That was a project for her. And I'm glad I did it. I'm not in a situation to build a companion historical fiction audience. I think my main audience will always be the police procedural, the noir mystery reader. But I'm glad to have done those. And a really surprising event that happened is a knitwear designer got together with a custom yarn dyer and a fiber arts studio store here in Tennessee, and they created a whole book club based around knitting projects based on the Galliano Club books. So it's the most fun thing I've ever been involved in. These people can knit, oh my gosh, but every project sold in kits corresponds to something in the books. It's just been wild. So that was something I never expected to have happen. It's been a joy. And I had no idea.
It's very sweet. The reason that you went down that road, the fact that you brought it home to New York, because that's the setting. Yeah. And also you have attributed some of the stories that are from your grandfather, who,
Correct.
yeah. So that it's really sweet. And I love that there's now this connection in Tennessee that that brings us all together, doesn't it? And so let's talk about your writing process, because it sounds like you're writing all the time.
I think for my mental health, I always feel better when I have a project going. I do. And right now, as I say, Barracuda Bay just came out. I'm in that probably 30 to 60 day transition period between thinking about this book and introducing it to readers, and then thinking about the next book, which I'll probably start writing in mid-April. And so my process is to let an outline percolate in my head for a while, and then I do, break out the colored sticky notes. And as I mentioned, I always have 3 elements in a book, so the sticky notes will be color coded for those elements. I will literally stick them all up on the wall, but I'll have made notes here and there that, are just paper clipped together for a while. And then I will just write to the outline. I'll probably revise it. Maybe a third in, I'll revise it again a couple times. I usually overwrite, so I have more scenes than I need. I will always park those in a holding zone until I get it right. So that's kind of basic.
And do you write every day for the most part?
Probably, I'd say 5 times a week, because there's always going to be a day that it's household things or, events or travel.
Yeah, life.
Yeah, life, laundry. So I try to write at least, I would say 4 to 5 times a week.
And you also have a blog. Is that still active? I'm trying to recall the name. Is it a Mystery Ahead or Mystery Abroad, something like that? That where you read a book, I think, and then write about it.
I have a newsletter every 2 weeks, Sunday morning, Mystery Ahead. It always has 3 sections. The first is my latest news, my top secrets. The second is an excerpt of what I'm writing now. And the third is a review of a book that I loved and think you will too. And invariably a mystery. I recently brought that over to Substack, which is a blogging platform that also allows you to email your readers. So I think that the readers who have been with me for a long time, they won't see a difference, but now folks within the Substack platform can be introduced to the newsletter as well. So I've been doing that. I think it's 7 years now.
Wow.
And some of the content is duplicated on my website. But generally, I save the good stuff for the newsletter. So mysteryahead.substack.com.
All right, thank you. And that kind of segues into what we typically do when to wrap up our program. And we have another program, monthly program that is open to readers, and they are invited to join us in a live Zoom, very interactive, and we talk about what we have read over the previous month and how we liked it. And so Mystery Ahead sounds like absolutely fascinating, and I'm pretty sure all of us are going to be signing up for that as soon as we get off this call. But with that said, we would love to hear something that you've read recently that you liked and you would recommend to our reader audience.
Oh, this is a great question. I've just finished reading Carla's Choice by Nick Harkaway. And if you're not familiar with that name, as I was not until a few months ago, Nick Harkaway is the son of John le Carré.
Oh,
And for le Carré fans, you recall that the first George Smiley book was The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And the spy is British man named Alec Leamas, who is killed trying to get over the Berlin Wall. Well, then the next book in the George Smiley sequence is Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, in which George Smiley is called out of retirement to find a mole within British intelligence. Well, Harkaway took that intervening time between those two books and wrote Carla's Choice, which really introduces, in that sort of wonderful off-camera way that Le Carré had, of introducing the super Soviet spy Carla, and brings George Smiley into another maze that he has to figure out, that Carla is at the heart. But it fills in the gap of what did all those people who were involved in the first book and the horrible outcome, and then suddenly, boom, it's never mentioned again in Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. So Carla's Choice fills in that gap. And it is not only a great plot, but I have to say Harkaway's writing is just sensational. His turn of phrase. I recall one that has stuck. He's talking about a filing cabinet and the was it unconvincing modern veneer. It's just like, just great wordsmithing. I mentioned to a British author friend, Jane Harvey Barrick, who writes as Barrick Ford, that I thought the son was a better wordsmith than the father. And I think she's still talking to me. But Carla's Choice by Nick Harkaway, and then go read Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and then go read Smiley's People, and you will have read the whole sequence of events in order.
I love that. Thank you so much for that recommendation. And our program is called Murder by the Book, and it is the first Saturday of every month at 10 o'clock, right here on Sisters in Crime Atlanta's Zoom.
Yeah.
So, Carmen, I really appreciate you joining us today. It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta. I'm not sure what it's like in Tennessee, but the sun is out, and people could be anywhere and they're here with us. And so thank you so much for joining us. And it's been fascinating talking with you. Before we sign off, does anybody have any comments or questions for Carmen? We do like to open it up to the audience, and we encourage audience participation. So feel free if somebody has something they'd like to ask or say.
It was fantastic. Thank you for coming, Carmen.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you, Linda, for suggesting it and inviting me.
Thank you so much.
And the
It's good
great
to see you.
questions, Linda.
Carmen's just
throughout there.
awesome. I am in awe of her. I just want to say all the things. She's
That's
awesome.
great. I love that. I love that. Charlie, do you have something?
I appreciate her being here. Thank you very much, especially about Harkaway.
Yes, I knew you would get that.
Oh, John le Carré.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And please check out sistersincrimeatlanta.com for more information and programming. Carmen, again, thank you so much. Fascinating. I'm glad to know you.
Thank you.
Don, we want to remind people of the chapter meeting.
Oh, yes.
It's going to be the member author showcase.
Oh.
That's coming up next weekend, right? Or 2
The
weeks.
weekend after,
It's the second Saturday of
yeah,
April
yeah.
at 10:30 at the Decatur Public Library and live on Zoom.
Yeah, but it's not as much fun on Zoom because you can't meet the authors and get your book signed.
That's right.
That will be, if I'm looking at the calendar correctly, that'll be April 10th.
Yes.
All
Thank you.
right. And Carmen, we hope sometime maybe you'll come to Atlanta and join us. We would love to have you.
It's not that far.
It's not that far.
They'll just
Okay.
drive down for the
For the
lunch.
day.
Yep.
And if there's a Braves game, you can catch a Braves game
Oh.
while you're in town. I always got to throw that out there. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Hang on a second.